today's webinar, How Women Win in Leadership. I appreciate everybody making time in their busy days to dial in. We have some great content to share with you this afternoon. Let's pause for just one moment while we have a couple of late stragglers connect into the webinar. We'll begin in about 30 seconds. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Encore Learning webinar of How Women Win in Leadership, which was one of the highest rated and best attended sessions at the 2016 NAA Education Conference and Exposition last summer in San Francisco. All of the rich content from the 2016 Education Conference was recorded and is available for purchase through NAAEI's Rewind program, a collection of 53 PowerPoint synced audio and video recordings. Purchasing this powerful online learning tool allows you to have ongoing access to some of the very best education and training content in the industry. You can share that content with your colleagues via training sessions and brown bag lunches, and you can also earn up to 6 CECs towards your NAAEI designation renewals. The purchase price is $2.99, and it's a great investment in your professional development. Please mark your calendars for the 2017 NAA Education Conference and Exposition, slated for January 21 through 24, 2017, in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia. You're already working on developing world-class education content for you, and we believe that we can surpass the high benchmark that we achieved in San Francisco. Now we can turn our sights toward today's presentation. Please let me introduce to you some awesome experts. Kelly Quattlebaum is Director of Marketing at CallMaX, an MRI software company. She has 14 years of experience in marketing and public speaking. Kelly manages all marketing activities for CallMaX, including digital marketing, trade shows, events, advertising, branding, and budgeting. Kelly has spoken or moderated for many conferences and organizations, including NAA, NAA Student Housing, Brainstorming, Crittenden Multifamily Conference, and FCAA. Next on our docket is Alex Jackiw, who is President of Milhaus Management, who oversees property management operations and asset management functions for company-owned assets and third-party clients. She is a nationally recognized real estate executive with extensive experience managing large portfolios throughout the U.S. Alex was NAA Chairman of the Board in 2013 and President of the NAA Education Institute in 2008 and 2009. Jennifer Staciokas, Senior VP of Marketing and Training at Pinnacle, is responsible for the national strategy and oversight of the corporate and property marketing and training departments for the Pinnacle portfolio. She began her career in the multifamily industry over 17 years ago and served in numerous capacities at 2 of the largest property management firms. Jennifer is a regular guest speaker, facilitator, and moderator at many of the industry's most renowned conferences, and a participant in NAA and NMHC. Heather Jones is president and founder of GROW, Next Generation Training for Multifamily. Prior to launch, she was director of real estate at Graystar in Arizona. Heather began her career in 1993 and worked her way up through the ranks on-site and at the corporate level. Throughout her career, Heather has managed over 40,000 units from California to Georgia and led 800+ associates, many of which have gone on to achieve executive leadership positions in the industry. Good afternoon, panelists. I am so excited to have you join us today, and I will now turn the floor over to Kelly Quattlebaum. Take it away, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Clark. And I just have to say it is such a pleasure to be back and to present this topic again. We had such a warm reception this summer at the NAA conference, and we're just so excited to be here again. I'm glad that it was just such a hot topic for men and women alike. That was the thing that really warmed my heart. So one of the things that we talked about as a panel as we kind of came together and we formed this How Women Win in Leadership panel we looked at that word win. You know, what does it really mean to win something? And when you really break it down by definition, it is to get or possess or gain possession by effort or fortune, but also to obtain by work. So if you really look at that, it's about your own effort and your own work. So what we're going to be talking about today is what you can do to gain access kind of over your career and to be able to win in that. So Clark, if you'll advance for me to the next slide. There we go. So, so that discussion about winning is something that we're going to look at in several different areas. So how can women win through mentorship? How can we win in spite of competition? How can we use networking to our advantage to win? How we can win in the face of risk, and we're going to be talking a bit about risk, and also how we can succeed together and as individuals. So we're going to be looking at some success stories and some tips for succeeding there towards the end. So as we move through this presentation, as we talk about these different topics, you're going to notice a lot of different areas where you can participate as an audience. We want you to really be part of this conversation. So you can do that in a number of different ways. You're going to notice right here, you're going to kind of see this hashtag, NAA EduConf win. So this is a specific hashtag that we put together for this session, and I'm going to be monitoring, looking and kind of keeping an eye on Twitter as we go along, and I'll be taking questions from Twitter at the end, but also kind of looking at some of your comments and feedback, as will the other panelists. So if you will keep an eye on that, use that hashtag NAA EduConf, and don't forget to put the word win on the end. You'll see that it's this second hashtag down here at the bottom as well. So I'll be calling your attention to that every now and then, especially when we do things specifically via Twitter. In the first section that I wanted to talk about with you, we actually are going to open it up with the audience. So I want you to participate, if you can, in this audience poll. All you need is your cell phone. So if you will pull out your phone and text one of these answers to this phone number. So the question is for your mentor, how did you identify your mentor? Did he or she approach you, or perhaps you approached them? So if you found your mentor, if you'll text found to 678-918-4115. This cell phone number is going to remain the same throughout the presentation. We're going to be using it a lot. So once you put it in once, you should be able to use it again. So if you found your mentor yourself, then put found. But if your mentor actually approached you, they singled you out, then I want you to text approached to that same phone number. And I'm going to share those results here in just a moment. And I also want to point out, if you want to stay in touch with our panelists, this phone number is going to be, as I said, on the screen throughout the presentation. You can actually text our first names to the same phone number, and you'll receive a text message with our contact information as well. So, so all you have to do is text Kelly, Jennifer, Alex, or Heather individually to that phone number, and you'll get a text message with that information. So I want to open this up to the panel. And I want to see what your responses are. And Jennifer, I'd like to start with you. How did you identify your mentor, and did he or she approach you?
So I think, hi everybody. I would say that my very first mentor was somebody that approached me, somebody that saw maybe something in me and thought that they could work with me to help me grow my career. But I think I've had multiple mentors throughout my career. And in certain cases, I've seeked people out, somebody that maybe I've respected and wanted to emulate some of the style that they've had. So I think it's been a good mix of both for me. But one thing I really want to talk about in mentorship is also the idea of having a sponsor. So a sponsor being somebody that's going to speak up for you on your behalf, somebody that's going to be your champion, maybe in the boardroom or in a conference room when decisions are being made about your career. It could be things in terms of your compensation, the promotions that may be available to you, or maybe additional projects or responsibility that may be given to you. And it's really important to have that sponsor. And sometimes that sponsor may also be a mentor to you, but it may also be somebody that's different and really kind of has your back and is championing you to other people to help grow your career.
It's a very good point about the sponsor, for sure. Alex, how about you? How did you identify your mentor, or did that person actually approach you?
Well, in my instance, again, as with Jennifer, that person approached me, and it wasn't so much a kind of an approach to become a mentor, but more of someone who wanted to champion my kind of abilities. So I kind of came up through the ranks in an environment where there are very, very few women in leadership positions in the real estate world, if any. And so I was surrounded generally by men, and a CFO of a company where I worked identified me as someone who was willing to take on difficult assignments and wasn't afraid of taking a risk, and he thought that was a pretty positive attribute given the kind of environment we were operating in. And so he made it a point to always challenge me with new opportunities and mentored me along the way and allowed me to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and develop my skill set. And he's someone who, while wasn't necessarily approachable to most people, he was someone that I admired and respected because of his intellect, and we just hit it off from the beginning, and was probably the strongest influence on my professional career of anyone as I moved through kind of growing in property management.
Very nice. So Heather, how about you for your mentorship kind of experience? Did you find your mentor as well as Alex and Jennifer did, or I mean, did your mentor approach you, or did you find your own mentor?
I think like both of the ladies have already kind of talked about, I've had a bunch of coaches along the way, and from early on in my career. But when it comes to mentors, you know, I can think back, and I've had 2 or 3 really throughout the course of my career that I would really call a quote-unquote mentor. And I personally reached out to all of those individuals and sort of solidified the fact that we had a mentor-mentee relationship. You know, so I reached out and I said, hey, I'm looking to get to this point in my career. I want to make this move. I want to make this change. I'd really like your help. I'm asking you to be my mentor in this situation. And that's how those relationships started and have still flourished throughout the years of my career.
Very nice. And it sounds like, just kind of from the experience that everyone has kind of had, both men and women as mentors or even as sponsors. So I think that's a good thing as well. So moving on to the next question that still falls under mentorship. Who have you been able to mentor? How do you help to uplift other women? That's something I'd really like to explore. And Alex, I'd like to start with you.
Well, thank you for that. When we talk about mentors, if I could just comment briefly on our previous conversation, I think women as a general rule tend to be very bashful about asking someone to mentor them. So I applaud Heather for having the chutzpah to kind of just step up and ask. And I think we need to be more upfront with people about making that request. With respect to mentoring, it's a broad range. I made a commitment early on in my career to mentor other women primarily because that is an area that was so lacking as I was coming up through the ranks. I've been in the business for almost 40 years. And so, having experienced that lack of female leaders to look up to that could help kind of boost my career, it's something that I've concentrated on heavily. Primarily at work, and most of my focus most recently has been in mentoring women to accept leadership positions in the National Apartment Association as well as their local affiliates, to get them to step up, to volunteer, to coach them on how to be more forceful in asking for those leadership positions and aspiring to those leadership positions. And secondly, I think that from my perspective, I want to get to young women early in their careers. So I've made it a point to mentor students both at Ball State University as well as at Virginia Tech, where I sit on the advisory boards of the residential property management programs. and really push women to look at opportunities in the property management field. So those are kind of my areas of focus for mentorship.
Very nice. And what about you, Heather?
Thank you, Alex, for that sweet comment earlier. And you are definitely a model for all women to follow as far as mentorship goes, because I want to make 2 points about this. One, not mentoring and undermining other females in your field comes out of fear. And, you know, generally new and eager talent often trumps experience. So you have to have enough confidence in yourself to give away your secret. And I think that's how I'm able to stand apart, is that, you know, I don't think I'm not afraid to tell women what I'm doing, you know, where I'm going. You know, I give away all my secrets. I try to be real with them and upfront with them and let them see the struggles that I go through, so that they understand, you know, you don't get to a certain positions without a little bit of hard work. And, you know, so I just really try to uplift women in a way that makes them feel responsible and accountable for their actions, knowing that, you know, they need to put in the time. And, you know, I'm always firm but fair. That's one of my things. And, you know, I'm not the sweetest person to work for sometimes, but I can tell you what, somebody will leave having worked with me feeling a lot more educated. They'll know much more about what their subject is, and, you know, they'll know more clearly the direction they need to go in, and they will end up thanking me for having been a little tough with them. So that's my feedback.
Very nice. And I kind of like something that kind of is a common theme here. I mean, Alex, your focus on helping other women because there weren't other women there to help you. And Heather, some of the things that you said, it reminds me of what we talked about as we were forming this panel, which is that quote from Madeleine Albright, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. So that's something that we're kind of working to kind of correct a little bit here, I think, with the panelists. We do need to share with one another, not be afraid to share with one another. That'll lead pretty well into our next topic as well. But Jennifer, on the area of mentorship, I know that you've mentored, I see you mentor a lot of people, and I enjoy seeing that out of all of you, really. So how have you done that? How have you helped to further and uplift other women?
Absolutely. I think there's a couple different approaches to it. There are often times when a lot of coworkers that I work with, men that have younger girls, either in high school or in college, and they just trust me to want to sit down and give some career advice to women on how they can really approach their career. What types of things should they experience in college? What types of things should they do after college to land that perfect job? So I'm very open to doing a lot of mentoring at both of the companies I've been with coworkers' children. And I think it's a great way to kind of set the tone with young women on what they should be pushing themselves to do in their careers. I've also had people reach out to me via LinkedIn, and maybe it's that connection that we went to the same alma mater, and they were curious about my advice on how I took my career from college on. But another thing, and not just as it relates to women, something that I'm seeing as a trend with a lot of the hires that I've been doing lately. In the past 2 years, I've probably hired 25 to 30 people to work directly on my team. And I would say the vast majority of them are millennials. And the questioning that millennials have of me as compared to some of the Gen X and the baby boomers is very much centered around community service, but then it's also very much centered around mentorship. A particular person that I hired to run our Canadian marketing division, his biggest concern was, am I going to have a mentor in me, his supervisor, but also in all the other people that he's going to be working with? It was very critical for him to make sure that he was going to receive constant coaching, constant feedback, and have that line of communication with multiple different people to be able to further his career within the company. So it's definitely a trend I'm seeing, and just being open to being approached by people that want to be mentored. And then also it's our responsibility to look at people in our teams and other departments in our companies and see potential in people and help them progress in their careers as well.
I like that point too myself. I kind of see people, just within my own company to kind of help them maybe find different career paths within our company and that kind of thing. And I really like the mentoring younger women theme. I think that kind of came out more or less with everyone's conversation there, and that reaching out to that college level the demographic I think is really, really good, kind of help people early on. For the audience,
Kelly, if I could comment real quickly, I think one of the things that Jennifer touched on is really, really important, and that is that frequently mentors see talents and opportunities in people before they see them in themselves, and we identify that and try to kind of nurse people through some of the nervousness or fear that they have to take the next step. So I think that's an important piece of mentorship.
Very true for sure. And I think it's a good thing to help in terms of overcoming competition, which is our next kind of topic here. So, and I do want to share also the audience for that. You guys are pretty much split, almost 50-50 down the middle. 52% of you were found by your mentor, and 48% of you actually approached your mentor. So it's about a 50-50 split on that front. But for competition, I'm going to open up at the panel for this topic, and I want to learn a little bit more about how you overcome the challenge of competition or intimidation that exists between women specifically. So Heather, can we kick things off with you?
Sure. So, I made a couple of notes on this question, and one is not to sacrifice your femininity for success. And to remember that we're all women, and the way I overcome competition is to simply disengage my ego, and I try to approach women of authority or any other woman around me with sincerity, and I try to establish a personal relationship with that person right off the bat. So in case, there's a woman that's my senior who, maybe gets the feeling that I'm, very ambitious and might be interested in moving up the corporate ladder, I never want her to feel uncomfortable with me. And I want her to always understand that I will never circumvent her authority and never step over her to try to gain momentum for myself. So, that's my typical approach.
Okay, I like that. So fight that kind of fear with establishing relationships, essentially, and establishing trust. So I like that's a good, good method. So Jennifer, what about you? How do you kind of overcome that competition?
I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what Heather said, and really kind of being that bigger person. That if you see somebody that's trying to compete with you or is maybe intimidated by you, really having just an open and a frank conversation with them and letting everything out on the table, and just really know that the ultimate goal is that we're really trying to work together, and our goal is to make everybody look good around us, if it's men or women, whichever departments that we work in, just really trying to be collaborative and always have, for me, I always have that smiling face. I like people to think that I'm approachable and that we can really discuss ideas, and that my ideas are not going to be any better than anybody else's that I work with. So just giving respect and being the bigger person.
I like that as well. Alex, what about you?
Well, I think Jennifer touched on a key word in this whole discussion, and that's being collaborative. Fortunately, we work in an industry where we tend to be more collaborative than many other businesses that I've been involved in. When I look at the banking industry, where I spend a good deal of my time with clients, that is a pretty cutthroat environment for men and women. The beauty of property management is that we are friendly competitors and we share information with one another fairly regularly. But the collaboration piece and the ability to be approachable and to be willing to share information, I think sometimes overcomes some of those kind of negative vibes of people feeling like they're vying for the same position or competing for the same position. Again, since I'm sort of the old lady on the group, I kind of came up in an environment where I predominantly competed against men. So I guess my skin got a little thicker and tougher as I moved up in my career, particularly since as the old joke goes, you've got to be twice as good as a man in order to get promoted. But you know, I think that women that develop a sense of their own identity and confidence in their abilities don't feel like they have to prove something to anyone else in the room. And to the extent we become more confident and trust our instincts and kind of understand our value, that speaks volumes and does a lot to kind of dispel the need to feel like you have to compete with someone else.
Very nice, and I kind of like what you said about kind of moving up the ladder, right? And that's something that actually is our kind of next topic that we want to talk about. And this is another audience poll, so please fill out your cell phones. I do want you to weigh in on this, and this is going to be the same question to the audience as well as to the panel. But is the level of competition stronger based on where you are in terms of the leadership ladder? So if you believe yes it is, then just text yes to that same phone number that we've been using. It's on the screen. And if you think no, competition is the same no matter where you are, then if you'll text no for me for that. And then I want to hear from our panel. And Jennifer, I'm going to start with you. Do you think that it does get stronger as we go up the ladder, or do you think that it's pretty much a level competition throughout?
You know, in my experience, I've seen it is based on the age range of the people that you're dealing with. So I think Alex or Heather, one of you mentioned this, the younger you are in your career, you're more eager, you don't maybe have as much experience and that finesse of how to work with other people. So sometimes competition, I think, increases, and that could be maybe in those middle management positions. I found that as you do rise, that if you're working with people that have more experience, that the competition doesn't seem quite as intense at that point between women.
Thank you for that. And what about you, Alex? What do you think?
Well, you know, I think that clearly there are more positions available at lower levels. As you kind of move up that ladder, there are fewer positions and more people competing for those positions. So I think the competition becomes a little bit more, a little stronger at that level, but you also have fewer candidates competing for those positions. I think it's going to be interesting with this new generation coming up. I think it was Chris Lee who published a study that said the real estate industry is going to need 25,000 new employees every year for the next decade, and we just don't have that many bodies. So if anything, I think the competition is going to be reversed, and companies are going to be competing for a very small pool of applicants. So it'll be interesting to see what that dynamic looks like as it plays out.
Heather, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, I agree with both of what Jennifer and Alex have said. You know, I do feel like, yes, that the competition does get a little more severe the higher up you go. And I talked about this when we were in person in San Francisco. But, you know, there's still less than 10% of women who are the CEOs or heads of companies for the Fortune 500. And, you know, those positions are coveted and they're protected. And, you know, I do feel like in multifamily in particular that it kind of depends. You know, it kind of depends on the person. It kind of depends on their career path and the company that you're working for. You know, I've had, you know, both good and bad experiences with competition as I'm, you know, trying to, you know, further my career. So I think overall, though, I do believe competition does increase the higher position that you get.
If I could just comment on one thing too, Kelly. Sure. Women have historically in property management, and without diminishing the role, have historically gone into kind of service-related positions. So they'll pick marketing, or they'll pick training, or they'll pick HR. So there are fewer opportunities for them to move up on the operations side. And, you know, those executive level positions generally go to people with operational experience. So as women begin to make choices in property management, they need to choose, you know, where their passion lies and where they are most comfortable, but also understand that if you want to be at the executive level of a company, unless you're a Jennifer Staciokas, who's the senior vice president at one of the largest management companies in the country, then typically you're going to have to look at an operations role as opposed to being kind of a staff employee.
That's a good point. And, you know, I think the general consensus overall for the panel is that the competition does get a little bit more fierce there towards the top of the ladder, and that is consistent with the audience poll, too. So the audience says 61% yes. The competition definitely increases as you go up, 35% or 39% rather saying no. So for the next, one other kind of little follow-up question, I guess, here on the competition, and I want to just touch on this very briefly, but how do women compete against other women and against other men for top leadership positions? You know, there's so few that are there, so how do they go about doing that? Alex, can you kick that off?
Wow. You know, I think it varies. It depends on the company and what you're trying to accomplish, but certainly I think credentials, education, experience, a broad range of experience, and not limiting yourself or pigeonholing yourself into one particular property type or one particular part of property management helps. You know, most companies now are looking for people that are well-rounded and have lots of different kinds of experiences that they bring to the table. And then developing credentials. I think in order to be competitive, you know, whether it's a college degree or whether it's a professional degree, professional credentials through the National Apartment Association or through the Institute of Real Estate Management will set you apart as you begin to compete against others, particularly for those high-level positions. And volunteering in industry trade organizations, I think, gives you lots of visibility and lots of cachet as people kind of review resumes.
Nice. And Jennifer, how about you? How can women be more competitive in these situations?
Sure. I'm going to talk a little bit about it from the skill side. So making sure that you're able to manage up and manage down. And sometimes I find that women, especially as it relates to competition, they focus all of their efforts on managing up and making sure they're telling their boss everything they're doing, all the great things they're doing. But from my perspective, if you manage down really well, build a really strong team that supports and respects you, that ends up showing up, and your supervisors are able to see the skills that you bring to the table, and then you're also able to parlay that into how you communicate the key goals and objectives that you're meeting to the executive team.
I would
That's
imagine
a great
that would
point.
speak very
That's
strongly.
a great
Yeah,
point.
for sure. For sure. Heather, how about you?
I'm going to echo a little bit of what Alex said. You know, just being flexible and, you know, not pigeonholing yourself into, I've got to work for this management company. I've got to stay in marketing. You know, I've got to stay in Arizona. You know, if you can open yourself up to opportunities, you know, nationwide or internationally now, if you've got the ability to do that, to go where the positions are, number one. Number two, you know, being open to managing any kind of property. You know, if we have several site folks on the call today, you know, don't be afraid to manage that, you know, C-class property that's, you know, down in that, you know, awful area of town because you think you're too good for it. You know, you can't. If you're going to advance your career, you really need to open yourself up to every opportunity and put yourself into situations that are uncomfortable and be willing to be uncomfortable. It will stretch your knowledge, and it will help propel your career forward much faster than anything else. You know, so just be open to change. And, you know, one thing that I ran into when I was trying to climb the corporate ladder is not having a college degree. And, you know, as much as I hate to admit that, it got in the way of me getting, you know, some vice president positions along the way in my career. And, you know, so the way I overcame that was I just started my own company. So,
there you
if you
go.
don't have a college, if you don't have a college degree, just do your own thing.
That's right. You know, and we'll be talking about that a little bit too later on in not the next topic, but the topic after that in risk. It's something that I really want to look at as well, and that is kind of falls in that category of risk, is starting your own business. So for networking, this is something that we kind of talked about as a group as well, that is something that can really help to propel your career forward. And over time, men have had more opportunities to network than with other men than women have had to network with other women, mostly because of organized sports, private clubs, and so on that have existed for a little bit longer, kind of have a longer history, if you would. So this has bonded men over the course of their careers. So what are some ways that that women can create similar bonds? So let's start with that. And for that question, let me kick things off with you, Jennifer.
Sure, great. So I'll give a couple examples. The first one is CREW. It's Commercial Real Estate for Women. It's a great organization that's not just for multifamily, but for the entire real estate industry. I know Alex is actively involved as well. And the first conference that I went to for CREW is very eye-opening to me. I was expecting the room to be entirely filled with women, and there's actually men that have joined that organization as well that are very much behind development of women and encouragement of women. So it was really eye-opening and interesting for me to see that, you know, these networks that we're going to talk about don't have to be specific just to women. There's also a great group in Atlanta of multifamily professionals that get together, and it's called the FEMS Dinner. They do it once a month, and they bond. I don't live in Atlanta, but I get an invitation quite often, and unfortunately I'm very rarely able to make it. But it's a great group of women that just network, share, you know, joys in their career, and share challenges that they're facing as a group. Another thing I would say is, you know, creating your own network, be it with just women, with men and women. I have a group, we call ourselves the Pancake Club. There's 5 of us. We're very close, and that's our group that we share almost on a daily basis, challenges and things that are good that are happening that maybe other companies can do. And I think Heather was exactly right, that don't be afraid to share your secrets. It all comes down to execution. So you can tell people everything you're doing, but not everybody can do it the same way that you do it. So don't be afraid of that. And then I'm also very fortunate to work for a company that supports the women that work for this organization, and we actually host an annual event every year for our women clients, and we invite our operations team, our head of client reporting, myself, and our client services team, and we entertain our women by educating them, allowing networking opportunities, and really just having some fun together too. So it's kind of that whole golf for guys, where we do our women's event with spa and wine and some education.
Very nice. And Heather, what about you? Any tips for ways that women can kind of bond together and create similar bonds?
Yes. So, you know, I talked about this in our in-person meeting, and, you know, I made fun of myself because, you know, you can't build a network of women overnight, or a network in general. You know, all of these associations are fantastic to join, but it goes far beyond going to the meeting and making a couple of contacts. You need to take it one step further, and, you know, I like to refer to it as, you know, you dating. You know, it's just like you're dating somebody. You know, you need to call that person. You need to reach out to that woman, talk to her, follow up, send her an email. You know, if you've connected with somebody, you don't want to let that relationship lapse, or just wait until you see her at the next event in, you know, 6 months. You know, you really have to foster those relationships. You really need to make the connections and put in the effort. And like I said, it's not going to happen overnight, but, you know, I've been able to do this throughout my career, and I've got women that I'm close to in this industry all over the United States. And it's serving me really well now, because, you know, I can pick up the phone and make a phone call and say, hey, you know, I've got something to show you. And, you know, and it's the ripple effects of that networking that I've done over the last 24 years is really making an impact now. So, you know, and then other than that, if you feel compelled, you know, for example, here in Arizona, one of the training directors at a local company here decided, you know, she wanted to get everybody else's secret. She wanted to know what everybody else was doing. So she put together a trainer roundtable. and she invited everybody, all of the training directors from all of the companies here in Arizona. And, you know, it's been wonderful. And, you know, we meet once a quarter, and, you know, we sit down. We usually have a little bit of education involved. And it's been wonderful to really connect and collaborate with the other training people in my area. So, you know, that's something that you might want to consider doing for yourself or your company or your area. You know, be the leader. You know, be the one to coordinate that group and put it in place. So, and then, you know, another association that I belong to is the National Association of Women in Leadership, and I really enjoy that organization if anybody's looking for another one to join. So thank you.
Very nice. And that was still you, Heather, correct?
Yes.
Alex, I'd love to hear a little bit, kind of some tips and tricks that you might have for what we can do to network.
Well, I think Heather's dead on when she talks about nurturing relationships. You know, it's like tending a garden. If you've got relationships with women or men, whoever they may be, those take tending and nurturing over time. I'm also a big fan of volunteering. I think sometimes we get a little myopic in thinking that our network has to be just within the industry that we operate within. You know, I have found huge opportunities in, you know, I sit on a board at the United Way of Central Indiana, for example, and when you're involved in those kinds of organizations and you're giving back to your community and you're interacting with people from different walks of life and different businesses, it also helps to enhance your network. But you know, most of my networking has been through CREW, as Jennifer mentioned, as well as through IREM and through the National Apartment Association because of my long involvement there. But you know, volunteering, taking classes, extending yourself in ways that may be a little uncomfortable for you, but give you the opportunity to really meet people from different walks of life. You know, Jennifer mentioned women getting together and doing special things together. NMHC every year at the annual meeting, there is a women's group that's invited to a spa event and lunch and an opportunity just to interact together apart from what the men are doing. And I have always found that to be a particularly fun kind of exercise and activity for getting together with the women that are attending that session as well.
Very nice. And kind of the next topic, this I want to turn over to the audience very quickly, but if you guys can text in if you think that networking groups play a major role in your success in your career, so type major, text major to the phone number below. But if you think that networking plays just kind of a minor role in your success, and I want you to type minor just so I can get kind of a fast response there from you guys. But I wanted to recap quickly about the types of groups. So we were talking a little bit about a lot of different groups that came up kind of just throughout the discussion already, CREW and whatnot. Alex, I like what you said about sometimes we do kind of get pigeonholed into our own industry and we don't look outside of the industry, but there's some great networking groups, even here in Atlanta. For anyone who happens to be in Atlanta, I've done a lot of work with women in technology, so I actually had shared this webinar out there with that group, which is a little bit outside the industry, but women in leadership, and they have a big role there that works on mentoring. They have coaches that come in and actually coach women to help them get from that kind of senior level, the kind of director level, up to the very senior leadership. Any other groups that we haven't mentioned already that you want to throw into the hat that people should know about? We'll start with you, Alex. Anything that you want to add?
Well, again, I'm more focused on kind of volunteer organizations locally here as well as nationally. So United Way has been a big one for me. The American Red Cross has been a big one for me. And then there is a new network of what are called Gold Star Wives, which are women who have lost husbands in battle overseas. I have a young woman that works for me, And so through veterans organizations, I've been able to reach out to a number of military wives and also to ex-military who are interested in employment, but it's also given me an entirely different perspective in working with those groups. So, you know, I'm a big proponent of kind of volunteerism as a way to expand your horizons and expand your network.
I like that, and it's a different kind of unique way to network too. Heather, how about you?
I really don't have anything to add. Everybody's covered everything.
I think so. Jennifer, any other groups that you thought of that we haven't covered? Any other groups that you wanted to mention? I think they have come out, a lot of them, but yeah. Well, I will say this for the audience. Thank you guys for kind of responding so quickly. 86% of you say that networking plays a major role. So I think that's the strongest poll that we've had so far. So that's awesome, and thank you for continuing to participate in that. So next topic, Heather, I really want to kick this one off with you, and I'm gonna let the audience kind of start to put in their poll results here. But with risk, you know, you mentioned earlier on starting your own business. I mean, obviously that's a pretty big risk. And in general, women or at least are considered to be more risk averse than men. So some women are just not as open to risk. So for the audience poll, how can women, or actually for the audience poll, if you will poll as to whether or not you like taking risks, so text like, or if you prefer to avoid taking risks. So, and there are people who will avoid taking risks at all costs, as it kind of came up earlier. You know, sometimes there are those people that are a little bit more timid, and we as mentors kind of try to push them forward in their careers. So as the audience is polling in for that, Heather, can you comment a little bit on how a woman can determine the right time to leave a job or to start a company like you have, and how could she evaluate this risk to determine the right action to take?
Sure, thank you. So, you know, I'm lucky, and I will say that right off the bat. You know, I'm single, and I don't have a family. So, you know, the fact that I'm a huge risk taker just means that, you know, I'm not afraid to move across the country. I'm not afraid to be without a paycheck. I'm not afraid to, you know, have to get rid of some of the necessities that I've been, you know, grown so accustomed to. And not everybody has that luxury. So I want to say that first and foremost. But, you know, not everybody, you know, has the will or determination or even desire to start their own business. But you may have a desire to grow in your career, and that's where taking risks, you know, can be a little bit more calculated. And I know some of the, you know, Alex and Jennifer will probably talk a little bit more about that. So, you know, but I want to specifically talk about, you know, making the leap and starting your own business, or if that's something you're thinking about doing. If you have the notion in your heart that this is something you want to do, the time to do it is now. You know, if you sit down and you think about everything that's involved. Uh-oh, are we still here?
Heather, are you there?
Okay, something happened. Okay, so if you sit down and start to think about everything involved, you're going to what if yourself to death. Well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens? What if I don't do this? And what if this can't happen? You know, so we focus on what might go wrong, and we generally underestimate our abilities, and we give in to self-doubt for ourselves. And that's what keeps us from really taking those big-time risks. You know, so had I known everything that was involved in starting a company a year ago, I might not have made that decision to do it then, but I'm certainly glad I made that decision now that I'm in it, and you know, and things are kind of rolling along, and you can never determine what's going to happen from day to day. So if you have any indication in your heart, do it. Now's the time.
Jennifer, any advice for you for how women can evaluate risk?
Sure. So about a little over 2 years ago, I changed positions, and I had been with my prior company for 15 years. So it was a really big decision. It was a big risk. I felt like I kind of knew what I could expect from the company I was at, and of course you don't know where it is that you're going. But a couple things. One thing I continued to ask myself was, if I didn't have fear, what would I do? And that really kind of led me to the decision of, after 15 years, I felt like I had done all that I needed to do at that organization, and it was time to kind of spread my wings and do something a little bit different. And I think for me it was really important that sometimes women tend to think with their hearts instead of with their heads. And in big decisions like that, I really kind of took my heart out of it and really thought about what was going to be the most logical decision and what was going to be the best decision for me to move my career forward.
I like that question. It's a good question to ask ourselves. Alex, what about you? Any good tips that you can give towards evaluating risk?
Well, I'm kind of a natural risk taker. I think that's where Heather and I kind of go hand in hand. And, you know, a lot of it has to do with your personal circumstances, and there's nothing wrong with women weighing their personal obligations against the decisions that they're making, as long as they're comfortable with them. What I encourage women to do is to not get so comfortable and get into such a comfort zone that they don't ask the kind of questions that Jennifer just kind of brought up when she was ready to make her career change a couple of years ago. I think oftentimes where women choose not to take risks is because they don't have enough confidence in their own capabilities. One of my favorite kind of anecdotes is there was a study that was done recently where they put 12 kind of characteristics on the table, or 12 areas of experience that a candidate needed for a particular job. And a man will look at that list and say, gee, I got about 6 of those. I'm going to go ahead and apply for the job, and I'll just wing it until I figure it out. A woman will look at those 12 things on the list, and if she can't check off all 12 of them, she'll say, I'm not qualified, and never bother to put her toe in the water. So I think women need to develop confidence in their own capabilities, and that will help a lot towards kind of eliminating that fear of taking that step and taking that risk and moving themselves forward.
Well, I have to say, we have about twice as many risk takers in this group as not. So 67% of the group is actually likes to take risks. 33% avoid, and I'm also I am likewise a risk taker as well. So I'm kind of one of those who jumps out maybe a little bit too far before I look down to see if the ground's still there. So, but anyway, so that's kind of our audience right now. So we got a bunch of risk takers. So that's kind of fun. So what about this is our last topic, and I am going to say we're actually about 8 minutes towards the end of the webinar. So I just want to quickly comment on these, but I would love to know from the panel what you have done personally or professionally to be excellent. So Jennifer, can you just comment on that briefly for us?
Sure. So I think one thing we talk about a lot at our company is that 3 things. You need to be nice to people, do the right thing, and be humble about it. I think that's really important in being successful in your career and in life. But also making sure you're setting goals, and goals that aren't always easy to accomplish, working hard, and then finding as much balance in your life as you possibly can. So many of us driven women like to throw our lives into work, but it's really important to disconnect, take your vacation time, take time in the evenings and the weekends to disconnect and recharge, so when you do get back to work, you're ready to go 110%.
I love that for sure. Good comment. Heather, what about you?
Well, I just want to piggyback on something Alex said a moment ago. One thing I've always done is applied for jobs I knew I wasn't qualified for. And, you know, you got to put your name in there. You got to put yourself into uncomfortable situations, like I said before. And those interviews and experiences are going to be invaluable in propelling yourself forward. And, you know, for myself, I expect to be successful. You know, I go into every situation expecting it to turn out well. So if I go in with that expectation, then I'm going to work really hard to make sure that, you know, that's what ends up happening for me. You know, I try to keep my vision in focus at all times, and, you know, I've got big visions for myself. I always have a dream board. I'm sitting here looking at mine right now. So I always have big visions, big dreams, but, I try to choose peace in every situation, and I trust in the Lord and in the way that He guides me to make my daily decisions. And with that, I'll pass it on to Alex.
Well, from my perspective, for me personally, I think that the most important thing that I can do. Can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I got disconnected. I'm sorry. The most important thing that I can do is to continue to learn. I think that I have been a student my entire life, and I'm always hungry for information and reading and learning and attending classes and attending conferences, and that has been kind of my professional kind of arrow in the quiver of things that I believe are important in order to be excellent. And then the corollary to that is I love to teach, and I love to speak in public on topics that I'm passionate about and that I've learned a lot about. And I think, as I'm sure Heather and Jennifer both know, in order to be able to teach a topic, you've got to know it very, very well and be very much of an expert at it. So those are the things that kind of push me to be excellent at what I do.
Very nice. I think that was some great advice right there. We're not going to have time, I don't think, to touch on the most important piece of advice that someone has given you, but I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tweet that afterwards using a hashtag. So make sure that you guys kind of write that hashtag down and look at Twitter for those responses. So they're going to tweet their responses, and I want you to tweet yours as well. So tweet your advice using that hashtag, and then we're going to wrap up the panel sharing by one kind of neat little thing that came up as we were planning, which is the idea that you should always know the 3 adjectives that you want people to use to describe you when you're not in the room, because most of the decisions that will be made about your career will be made when you're not in the room. So one fun little game is to know those 3 adjectives and to share them. So I'm going to kick it off. And mine are the way that you would describe me: inspirational, intelligent, and innovative. And Jennifer, I'm going to ask you to go next.
Sure. I would say good communicator. I'm somebody that gets it done, and I'm responsive.
And Alex?
I'm going to go with ethical, thought-provoking, and resilient.
Very good. And Heather?
Yeah, I'm going to say Heather's a risk taker. She's driven, and she operates with integrity.
Very good, very good. So with that, I do not have any Twitter questions, but I do have a little announcement, I guess, that we can make at this point. This topic from the summer at the NAA Education Conference was a big hit. So I'm happy to announce that we will be continuing that discussion in 2017. So be looking for more on that as the conference agenda and everything comes out. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Clark. If we have any live questions that we can answer now, I think we can maybe cover 1 or 2 possibly. But otherwise, what we'll do is also take those questions, and we will follow up with you after the webinar as well.
Hi, Kelly. This is Clark at NAA. I think I failed to identify myself at the beginning of the webinar, but I host a series of webinars all year long. We do sneak peek webinars of upcoming events, as well as Encore learning webinars of things that really resonated at our events. So make sure you stay tuned to your email for more learning opportunities. I also wanted to mention that this webinar has been recorded. It will be posted to the 2017 Education Conference website, and you'll also receive a follow-up email in a couple of days with a link to the recording. So you'll have full access to the conversation. You will also have contact information for each of the presenters so that you can reach out and do any follow-up questions. I'm afraid we're out of time and don't have time to take questions from the audience right now. I just want to thank Kelly, Alex, Jennifer, and Heather for sharing their insights on how they have managed to navigate their way to a more successful career. I think they're all very inspiring, and I know I'm very personally grateful that they've made time for us today. Make sure you mark your calendars for the 2017 Education Conference that will be in Atlanta. We're going to be there June 21st to the 24th. The education program should be announced in about 2 weeks on the website. They'll also do some marketing to let people know that they can go and peruse the catalog of courses that will be available. And that concludes the webinar for this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.